and profoundly unhappy most of her life. Born in 1924, she grew up among the most interesting and artistic people in Cambridge. Her mother, Frances, was most famous for the poem "To a Fat Lady Seen from a Train," which in England is a very famous poem. "Oh, why do you walk through the field in gloves, missing so much and so much? Oh, fat white woman whom nobody loves, why do you walk through the field in gloves? When the grass is soft as the breast of doves, and shivering sweet to the touch, oh, why do you walk through the field in gloves, missing so much and so much?" This, to me, incidentally, just as an aside, completely expresses the way that my mother and my grandmother were as women. They always seemed to be missing life. In 1936, Claire's older brother John, a strikingly good-looking poet and communist, went off to fight with the International Brigade in the Spanish Civil War. In January of the following year, he was killed in battle, shot through the head by the fascists. It was his 21st birthday. Claire was then 12. Even before her son's death, Frances was in a depression so severe that she bemoaned her inability to feel any grief whatsoever. Soon she went into a rest home and stayed there for a year. Claire was sent away to boarding school. Later she attended Newnham College, Cambridge, to study medicine. It was during this period, in the last years of the war, that she was introduced to my father. Cecil, as we say it in England, was the son of a professor at Oxford, Sidney Chapman, a theoretical physicist who discovered a magnetic layer around the Earth, now known as the Chapman layer. He already had a degree in physics from London University, and after the war would pick up a second in history at Trinity College, Cambridge. He was kind, intelligent, decent, honest, ethical, rational, objective, and fair. He was the wrong man for my mother. As a teenager, Claire climbed into the attic of her mother's house and found boxes and boxes of love letters her parents had written to each other, hundreds of them, mostly from her father to her mother, most written after they were married. They expressed a love of such depth and power it was almost shocking. It was as if each had found in the other the absolute ideal. I think this rare state of romantic and intellectual passion is what Claire expected in her own marriage. They got married in 1947. By now she was in her final year of training at medical school. Soon she was pregnant with my older sister, and if you are looking for a determining moment, a moment where life could have provided her with sufficient pride or structure to overcome her instinct towards self-destruction or not, this is where you might find it. Taking the final exams which would qualify her as a doctor, she failed one paper. She abandoned medicine for motherhood, and compounding the sense of failure the descendants of great men tend to feel, she never went back. My father's partner, Peter, was a graceful man, slender and quick. Educated at Stowe and Cambridge, his mother was a German aristocrat, a von der Planets, his father a correspondent for the Manchester Guardian. A long-distance runner for Britain in the 1936 Olympics, Peter had been expected to win in 1940, but the Games were not held because of the war. His bearing was upright and athletic. He spoke with an upper-class accent and voted Conservative, but was a man who didn't seem to quite fit in anywhere. And to me this was his charm, a kind of awkwardness, a shyness handled with rueful dignity. Peter and my mother had met in 1936 when she was only 13 years old, and he in his late teens or very early 20s. Their families knew each other, and he had been invited to a party at her mother's house. He was at his most glamorous, having just run in the ominous Hitler-dominated Olympics. Innocently or not, he kissed her, and she never forgot it. 18 years later, they started an affair. A day or two after the birth of my younger brother Francis, my father noticed a letter in Claire's writing addressed to Peter. As he saw both of them every day and could easily have passed on whatever my mother might have wanted to say, he was at first puzzled and then suspicious. He opened the letter. It said she was glad to be having Peter's baby, even if they could not be together. He took to the breast very quickly, she wrote, just like his dad. This was a typical humor of my mother. My father was furious, confused, and then depressed. Everything was so entangled. The business was literally attached to our house. He already had 2 children, and in spite of everything, he still loved Claire. When he sought an explanation, she told him of that first kiss, and how even now, whenever Peter came into the room, her stomach turned over. Peter was married and had a child, and could not or would not leave his wife. Cecil decided that as far as he could, he would forgive Claire and accept the situation without further recrimination. Francis's paternity was kept secret, and he was brought up as one of us, loved by all. A month or so after Francis was born, Peter's au pair came to see my mother. "I'm sleeping with Peter," she wept, "and I just don't know what to do." My mother did. She went round to his house and threw a brick through his window. In her early 30s, she now became willfully promiscuous. Whether this was her way of exacting revenge on Peter for this humiliation, or whether it was simply an attempt to drown her depression in sensation, who can know? She began to drink more heavily. What can you know of anyone's marriage, even the marriage of your own parents? But I suspect that in my father's decency in forgiving my mother lay the death of this one. There is an element of unintended cruelty in such forgiveness. It gives you a possession no one should have. As she slid into alcoholism, I think he felt, albeit unconsciously, that like a character in a Greek tragedy, her self-destruction was inevitable and deserved. The next thing I'm going to read is, I went down to Dayton once to go and sort of meet people in the town. I met some very strange people, and if I had more time, I'd love to read more about them, because there's some fantastic people in Dayton of all kinds. And, but anyway, here's a little bit. This is where I go down the second time to see the reenactment. By the time I take my second trip to Dayton to go see the reenactment of the trial, I've decided without question to make the event the center of my book. I fly to Chattanooga and rent a car. In spite of losing my way and having to cut across country through dark hills, sensed rather than seen, I arrive in Dayton and check into the Best Western. It's an ugly, sprawling hotel out near the Lazy Boy factory. The woman behind the counter can't find my name in the reservations book, but it's not a problem. I ask for the best room in the hotel. It's available, and it's the bridal suite. The best room in all these rural hotels seems to be the bridal suite. A monumental light green plastic jacuzzi in Grecian style occupies at least a third of the room. It's right in the bedroom. One tortured edge, scarred with cigarette burns, almost touches the bed. I decide to go for a drink. Dayton is in a dry county, but for some reason you are allowed to buy and consume beer at the Best Western bar. I assume it'll be a festive place, brimming with Dayton's fun-loving, mirthful set. Maybe there'll even be some fellow skeptics in the bar down here to laugh with me at the reenactment. As I round the corner of the hotel in the drizzling, damp, enveloping hotness of the night, I encounter a sodden behemoth standing at the rear of his rusting car. He is in the process of dragging a vast, sweat-stained T-shirt up over his head, revealing a pallid stomach as big as a VW bug, but covered in matted hair. I nod at him as I go by and enter the bar. It's a corridor drenched in a dull, gloomy yellow light. There's a jukebox at one end. 2 or 3 tables and chairs are crushed up against the wall opposite the long bar. There are 5 inebriates here, 2 women and 3 men. A young, pregnant girl stands behind the bar, smoking voraciously. I take a bar stool down the far end and order a beer. Conversation starts up again.